Hi. I want to share with you 4 life experiences that I had that really displays in my life personally the power of camping ministry. And the first one happened when I was between 5th and 6th grade, and I was swimming at a pool, and in that phase of my life I was awkward, I was silly, I was goofy. Really, actually, not much has changed. But I knew many people. I didn't have a lot of friends. One friend, her name was Shauna. She saw the need for me to be in community. Not just any community, but Christian community. And so she invited me to her church, Crestwood United Methodist Church. And I remember walking into that building and seeing the youth and seeing the volunteers and seeing the youth pastor and experiencing a level of acceptance that I had not experienced in my life. Well, as I got to know that group, we went on a retreat to Lucan, and it was around a campfire with the stars shining bright, where my youth pastor, Larry Stess, laid out the gospel message. And there I felt the weight of my sin lifted and the grace and love of Jesus pour in. And that was when I decided to follow Him and His guidance in my life. And so I returned to Crestwood, and I jumped in with both feet. I devoured God's Word like it was Hershey Kisses. And then about my freshman, sophomore year, we went on a retreat to Camp Aldersgate. And of course, the volunteers, it's towards the end of the evening, and the volunteers are trying to get all of the kids settled in their rooms. And I was aware that I was being allowed to stay up later than the rest of the youth. And so I began having conversation with Larry. And as I'm talking to him, I have this awareness that God's calling me to ministry. I mean, not just to follow Jesus, but to make ministry my vocation. And I open up and I share this with Larry, and there's a pause. And he looks at me and he says, "It's about time you figured that out." Now, I am so thankful that he didn't tell me that, but he let me discover that through God's grace on my own, and that happened at a sacred space like Aldersgate. The last experience I want to share with you is early in the morning, and I'm getting ready to head to the airport. My dad and I are getting in the car, and like many families, we were running a little bit behind schedule. And so we're going down the road, and I'm looking at my dad, and I'm looking at the speedometer, and it's 5 miles an hour under the speed limit, and I'm looking at the clock. And I'm looking at my dad, and I'm looking at the speedometer, and I'm looking at the clock, and I'm looking at my dad, and I'm looking at the speedometer, and I'm looking at Dad, we're going to be late. Now, I don't know if he didn't have his coffee for the morning, but I saw the aha go on in my father's mind, and he looked at the speedometer, and he looked at the clock, and then we zoomed to the airport, and I ran through the airport, barely making my flight to go to Costa Rica for a mission trip. And it was there that, yes, I went to minister, but I was ministered to. And for the first time in my life, I got to experience a world outside of my world. And so, I guess in theory, I need to thank Kavanaugh for being the place that got me to church. And I need to thank Lucan for the place where I learned who Jesus was and accepted Him. I need to thank Aldersgate for being the place where I was called to ministry. But really, I need to thank you. Thank you for supporting Camping Ministries. And thank you for pouring into the life of the church and for the scholarships that will be produced from the annual conference's offering. Thank you.